welcome to Inside the Build, the show where we travel across the state of Michigan and surrounding areas to meet with the builders and drivers of these amazing works of art. On today's episode, we're traveling to Gaylord, Michigan to meet with Kenny Dangler, owner of Northern Performance Cars. We're going to sit down with Kenny and discuss what it's like owning a performance-based business, being a drag racer, his 1,800 horsepower Camaro, and how he manages to have a life outside of this entire fast lane. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
I don't know, I've always been into cars. It's been something that's been kind of neat ever since I was a kid. My dad was always into stuff like that, so it kind of made me lean towards that as a hobby. You know, growing up in northern Michigan in a small town, it wasn't really a big thing. So a couple friends and I, we had a couple slower, non-existent cars that, would never do anything. So I ended up moving to Florida in 2005 and ran into a crew of people and was like, wow, it's like, a whole new world, like Aladdin. So it was pretty neat, getting to see and experience stuff that wasn't really a big thing up here. The import phase, in the early 2000s, and went from there and then starting to see cars that were faster than crotch rockets, and you're just like, poof, my mind is blown. So that was kind of like the start of everything. I started going to the drag strip in like 2006 and didn't have anything super spectacular. Kind of took it one step at a time. And then as I got a little older and mature, started, realizing that it took a lot more money to go fast than I realized. So I was like, well, I better, work a little harder if I want to go fast in life. So finally got to the point where I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do some of this stuff. So started really focusing on it and learning a lot and reading and trial and error. I ruined a lot of stuff in my time. So that's the best trial and error right there, is just, breaking stuff and learning what you did and try to correct it and go from there. So it's kind of like the basis, and that's kind of what got me into it. And the last 6 years, this really was a trickle effect, and it's probably never going to end now. So, well, I guess really the Black Civic was probably the first thing I ever took, so, yeah, really, I always had a dream ever since, 2005 or 2006, I'm like, just to wrap your head around it, like I'm going to run 10-second quarter mile in a car that I can drive on the street. So I set out to think like, I'm going to do it with a Honda Civic, because I wasn't as smart back then. So it took a little more work and effort and, a lot of broken parts. And you take a car that came with 96 horsepower and try to make 400, 500, 600, 700 horsepower with it, you tend to find everything that can possibly go wrong with it. So I ended up rowing my way into like the high nines when I really was just dead set on trying to go 1099. So that was really my first fast car that kind of brought it into perspective, and ended up trapping over a little over 150 horsepower in the quarter, 150 mile an hour in the quarter. Ended up going from there, and then I was like, I'm going to get something that works a little bit better on the street. So then I got into that car exactly right there. 2015, I picked it up. It was like $3,000. Had a spun rod bearing, super clean, garage kept. One of my buddies drove me over. We picked it up, brought it home, and I was like, if I could make this thing run an 890, that would be phenomenal. So I had a little bit of issues with it in the learning curve in the beginning, but the first real pass I made with the car was like an 870. So that came far too easy. And then there was once again a snowball effect. And then I wanted to go 7s, and then I want to go 750s. And then I'm like, hey, I'm going to try to go 699. And that's absurd with a car with a CD player, power windows, that I can cruise on the highway. So that's the goal for this year. So when I moved to Florida in 2015, I told myself I'm not going to work on cars anymore. It's just, I want to get into something else. I don't care if it's sales or, anything, just do something else. I've always been involved with cars ever since I was a kid. And it was something that I'm very passionate about. But at the end of the day, when you take your passion, you combine it with work, and then the passion just kind of fades. So I moved down to Florida in 2015. I linked up with some old friends, which, introduced me to new friends. And I met one of my buddies down there, and some things fell into place. And he goes, dude, I'm going to start this big performance shop. You should help me out and you should work with me. And I was like, oh, great. I don't really want to work on cars anymore. So it was tough for me, but I definitely wanted to help him and get his situation going and his dream going. But it wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my life, just because it was a fun thing for me to do. So when I combined it with work, it ripped the pleasure out of it. So anyways, we ended up opening up Speedline Performance in Ocala. It just started right off doing phenomenal. Michael Carpenter owns it. He's still doing phenomenal to this day. So then after a year and a half or so, I just was like, here I am again, in a garage, 100 hours a week. Even if you only work 40, you and your friends have projects to fix and finish and races coming up. So it's a never-ending project. So the 100, 110, 120 hours a week, whatever you want to call it, it was too much. So I decided, I'm going to move back home and get into something else up in northern Michigan. So I came back up here, and I got with an old friend, and I was like, I'm going to do computer repair and sales. And I did that for a little while, and it made me realize that wasn't me. No matter what I do, I'm always going to be involved in cars. So what better way to start something and do it myself? So 2016, 2017, I ended up building this little shop, and I thought, I'll tinker on stuff here and there and do it kind of as side work. And within the first year, it was a 40, 50, 60 hour a week thing in the summer. So I was like, well, here I am again. So this has been my full-time gig for 2 years now. I do like online sales. I have an eBay store. I customer projects in and out and in and out. The springtime gets really crazy because, people, they prepare over winter and plan, and then they get their taxes back and they're super excited. So I get a rush of cars from, April until the end of July, beginning of August, where I can't keep up. So it ends up being fun, but it's challenging in the beginning because, you're taking phone calls, you're doing this. And after working in a bigger environment with several employees, it's really tough. So I decided that I would just want to stick to it myself. Even though it's super stressful in the spring because it is so many hours and, phone calls and text messages and Facebook messages and people showing up. And as fun as it is, it's still a job. So it has that balance where it's tough. So I try really hard to kind of keep myself from getting burnt out on it. This past winter, it worked out really well. It was pretty slow, so I was actually excited about that. Save a little money throughout the summer and kind of just sit back and do your own thing. Go out and snowmobile with the friends and go on vacation. So it works out nice. I got a pretty good little gig here going, so I kind of enjoy it now. So this year, I started out with a simple turbo swap. I said to myself, I have a lot of money into this car just for it to be a fun car and just for, kind of a piece of a reflection of what I can do and what I have the capabilities of doing with anyone that knows anything about speed. I mean, you can only go as fast as your budget. So it's tough to build a car that would compete with, say, a nationwide, standout with guys that have unlimited budget, because I am small, a small business owner. I own a house and this and that. So I have a lot of stuff to take care of myself. But this winter became really, really weird. I started this whole thing out when I maxed the turbo out last fall. I ran 750 at 182 in the quarter. I ended up going 205.99 mile an hour and half mile. They wouldn't let you do a burnout, so it was super easy. But anyways, I thought to myself, I have this crotch rocket I never ride. I'm going to sell it and buy one really nice turbo. So I got rid of the 88 millimeter Force Inductions S400 chassis that I had, and I bought a GT55 98 that they had on the shelf just because I was like, I don't class race the car, so why not just go bigger? So I bought this GT55, and I thought to myself, if I could go a quarter to a half second faster, that would be sweet. So I get this turbo, and I'm like, man, this is the nicest thing on the car now. So then I start looking at the rest of the car, and I'm like, shit, I need to update a couple more things. Well, the couple more things ended up being, I think I reused 4 or 5 things on the entire car. So it's the same long block, the same heads. I swapped the cam for a little bit bigger camshaft to, accommodate the turbine size. Shim the valve springs are really the only differences for the engine. I went to a ringless transmission. I had a couple issues with it in the past because the car wasn't extremely light. You start taking passengers and stuff and you're getting up 34, 35, 3,600 pounds. So I went with a ringless transmission, Midwest chassis fab 9-inch, cut a little weight out of the back, 40 spline gun drilled axles, completely new front subframe. It's Midwest chassis upper and lower control arms. I have a lot more adjustment. Instant center adjustments this year is going to help me huge. But yeah, at the end of the day, I ended up fabricating an entire new turbo kit. I went with GT55. I have a chiseled 3,000 horsepower intercooler. It's air to water. I went with a Holly Sniper race intake. I'm going to try to squeeze out every last bit of RPM I can this year, just because if I go any further with the rear gear ratio, I'm going to end up getting into a point where the car doesn't really 60 foot and accelerate as quick as it would with the tighter ratio. So added more roll cage, a couple little things here and there, but I mean, really, I ended up spending probably $25,000 more than I planned on the car this winter, but it should be a pretty hefty deal. It should run pretty good this year. So when I started Northern Performance Cars, it was, like I said, it was kind of a thing where I thought to myself, I'll keep a day job in the computer repair business with a friend of mine, and then that way I could do a car on the weekend and make some extra cash, and it wouldn't really feel like work as opposed to doing it every day. So in the beginning, I thought to myself, if it did become to that point to where I just couldn't stand it anymore, then this would probably be the time where I just quit doing it altogether, and that way I just do something that would be unrelated. That way I could stay passionate about it. So, you'd get a couple people that would want repair work here and there. And, it ended up being to the point where I would turn down a ton of work because, although I'd love to do all these things for people, brakes and stuff like that, it's not something I want to do. So, it'd be great to take that extra money and, advertise and say, yeah, we can do brakes and this and that, but I'm only one guy. And the passion for me is, camshafts and turbochargers and tuning. So it's the thing that I've basically narrowed down and say, like, this is basically what I'm going to do. And I told myself, unless it was a close family friend that needed me to do something for him, that, I'm just going to have to turn down all the repair work. And I just want to strictly stick to performance. And then that way it's something that I enjoy doing. I mean, it's still work. It's not like it's fun. I get people that are like, man, it must be awesome just to be oily and greasy all the time and tear camshafts out. But it's not as fun as it sounds. But it is, at least you get the gratitude at the end where, you throw a cam and headers and, stall converter in a car, and you take the customer for a test drive, or, you tell them take it for a ride, and, just the grin, so the smile on their face to see, hey, I made another 90 horsepower, 120 horsepower. That's very satisfying. So that's kind of one of the things that I want to keep going. If I stay busy doing that, then I'll be completely content. If I can make a decent living at it, and I'm not looking to get rich. So, I've been pretty content with just how things are going. So I wouldn't change it yet. Well, I spent a lot of time at Mid-Michigan Motorplex just because we did end up moving farther north than, I really would have chosen to, but we are close to family. So Mid-Michigan Motorplex is located in Stanton. It's in between Elma and Edmore. So it's a nice home feeling track. It's not extremely busy. You don't have the huge city crowd. The owner's super cool. He lets us stay a little later, or, he's really fun to work with, a really good guy. So we spent a lot of time there. But this year I ended up picking up another enclosed trailer. So I'm looking to venture out and go to 131 more often. Maybe stop at a couple grudge events, even though I don't grudge race, just because they do a really nice job on the prep, and there's a fun event down at Milan and stuff. So I'll be able to stretch my legs a little bit, and hopefully I have the time this year to make it to LS Fest. It'd be pretty cool to go there and just see a lot of people that I know from the internet. It'd be kind of fun to put, faces with names, and, get to meet some people that I've chatted with quite a few times. So for this year, I've always been kind of independent. I like to do things myself. I don't like to ask for help. It's kind of one of those things that, I like to learn. So, you constantly asking for help and having people do things for you, you never get to really make any progress. Regardless of what people think or say, I think that that's one of the things that really has made me come as far as I have today. If I run into a problem, I like to diagnose it. I'll tear it right to pieces, figure out what I've done wrong. And I think that's crucial learning in this industry, especially because you get, with the internet the way it is today, you got guys out there, there's so many people that want to be spoon-fed, they want to just spend the cash and just walk right into a car that runs 750 right out of the box. There's a lot of times when you could do that. It takes a lot of money, but at the end of the day, what do you take from that? You got a time slip, and it doesn't matter to anybody. But if you spend the countless hours out here and you go to the track and you break or this or that, and you figure out all the things that you've done wrong, that really helps you get to a point to where now you have the knowledge to, no matter what comes to you, you can just absolutely solve it right on the spot and move forward. So in saying that, I've always done my own tuning, my own engine building. That was a long story that goes way back, but I paid for an engine to be built one time, and it ended up being a catastrophe a couple days later. So ever since then, I said, if anybody's going to ruin my money, I'm going to do it myself. So I started really digging into that and doing my own engine builds, ground up. There's one thing on the car that I haven't done, and I haven't built the transmission. I buy the transmission from FTI. Scott West from FTI, he's worked with me a couple times. Super great guy. He's always giving me good deals, you know, and down and out, he'll warranty parts for you. He's a good dude, great company to deal with. So that's the only thing that I haven't assembled myself in the car is the transmission is straight from FTI. Last year, or actually 2 years ago, I bought their level 5, which was a ringed 1500 horsepower flywheel trans. I ran that transmission for 2 summers. I had 2 small brakes, and Scott took care of me both times. So anyways, between that, I run the MS3 Pro Evo. The last couple of years, they had a couple issues in the beginning where, you know, some boards were crossed and some manufacturing defects that weren't necessarily their fault, but they jumped right on board. They took care of everybody they could, but man, did they catch some slack from the internet, which of course it's the internet. So if anything goes wrong, it's always somebody else's fault. So they, you know, what better of a company to say, you know, we recognize there's an issue with X amount of models that came out from here to here. If you bought a computer between these dates, send it back to us free of charge. We'll cover shipping. We'll repair it and get it back to you as soon as we can. So that was really a stand-up thing of them guys to do, which, I mean, to me, that goes a long ways. One of my favorite things about MS3 Pro DIY Auto Tune is, you know, you can get a hold of those guys. You can call them. They talk to you. Some days they're busy, you know, they're a big corporation, so it's kind of, well, bigger. It's kind of tough for them to answer everybody's little piddly question on the internet from Facebook messages and stuff, so I understand how that goes. But, you know, you deal with any of the other companies where people praise Holley and people praise this, and there are good companies, and I can't say anything bad about Holley, but I've never called Holley and got anyone on the phone. So as far as that goes, it speaks for itself. But this year, I had MS3 Pro with their Evo. I actually had one of the first units that came from the floor. I ended up buying a couple of them for a friend and I. But anyways, I ended up running their computer for the last 2 years. I mean, they've been flawless for me. I haven't had a single issue with them. I think I got 10, 12, 13 units in customer cars, and I haven't had a single issue. So it's been great. It's done everything that we need, fits our budget. But anyways, this year, they ended up getting with me last fall and saying, you know, congratulations, you've been making great progress the last couple of years. You know, what are you using for this? What are you using for that? And I'm sitting back like, oh, nothing. You know, I have a wideband in the car and I tune it to that, and I'm not aggressive with timing, and I take care of the car, and, you know, I read plugs, and that's an uncommon thing these days. But they ended up thinking like, wow, this guy doesn't use anything for any kind of great data or temperature exchange. So I was using factory truck coils and probably making, depending on who you ask, 1,700 flywheel horsepower. I went 153 mile an hour in the 8th. And they basically had a sale on coils, which was really cool. I messaged the guy and I said, hey, you know, does that apply to the dealer account? Just being, you know, making a joke. And he said, yeah, you know, Kenny, we'll help you out on that, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up picking up a set of coils. And he said, you know what? If you buy the coils, I want to send you an entire setup for EGT monitors. And I was like, oh, you know, that's a little out of my budget. It's you know, $950. And he goes, no, if you buy the coils, I'll make sure that I send you an EGT setup. So I was kind of like, wow, you know, I've never ever had a company reach out to me and say, hey, we want to basically help you. And I don't want to say it in a giving way, but we want to give you these coils or give you these EGT monitors because we want to help your program succeed. So that was something that really struck me deep. That was really cool of them. I've never had anything for free, so that was pretty awesome. So that's one more thing that really makes me appreciate those guys and continue to use those guys for every customer build I do that requires a standalone unit. We go with the Evo and the Ultimate every time. So that was super neat. You know, the guys from Brian Tooley, they're always helpful. Lil John Motorsports, he's always there. He's a dickbag, but we love him. You know, I've always ran one of his camshafts, best in the market, regardless of what anyone says. Super easy on the Velve train. You know, take a lot of RPM, hydraulic rollers, you know, they're awesome. So it's a couple companies that I use quite frequently, and it just works, you know, and works very well for what we use it for.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel Inside the Build. Also, feel free to share it on Facebook and Instagram. And stay tuned to episode 2, where we travel to Tower, Michigan to meet with Brian Baumgarten from Baumgarten Racing.